1 month, 200 officers, 40 square kilometres searched, 1,400 tips from the public, $1 million in reward money. And Australia's most wanted man, Dezi Freeman, is still a ghost. Victoria's Chief Commissioner, Mike Bush, recently gave an update on this manhunt. What he said was careful and measured. But the numbers he revealed? They tell a very different story about how this operation has been handled from the start. It's been over a month since Detective Leading Senior Constable Neil Thompson and Senior Constable Vadim Dewart were gunned down in Porepunkah, Victoria. While executing a search warrant, the initial response was massive. Almost 500 police officers, Australian Defence Force assistants, helicopters, drones, thermal imaging. So where does the investigation stand now? Let me give you exactly what Commissioner Bush said in his recent statement on National Police Remembrance Day. First, the current resources. 200 officers are still actively deployed in the search area. Second, the scope. They have physically searched over 40 square kilometres, both by foot and by air. Third, public assistance. The community has provided 1,400 pieces of information to police. Now, here's Commissioner Bush's exact words about those tips. He said, "None of them have led to any positive leads." Let that sink in. 1,400 tips. Not one has produced a positive lead. Commissioner Bush also explained what officers are currently doing. Again, his exact words. "We have to often revisit things we've already searched to make sure we haven't missed anything." They are researching areas they've already covered. When asked directly if Freeman was still believed to be in the area, the Commissioner said there are a number of likelihoods and that police have followed up on leads in other locations. But he provided no specific details about where or what those leads were. Finally, Commissioner Bush acknowledged the impact on Victoria Police. His words, "This has really damaged our police service and the community, and we are determined to bring this matter to a conclusion." He also stated, "We will not give up until we find that person." Those are the facts as presented by Victoria's top police officer. Now let me tell you what I think those facts actually mean. To understand why this manhunt has produced zero results, we need to look at what happened on August 26th. 10 police officers arrived at Freeman's Porepunkah property that day to execute a search warrant. 10 officers. That's not an insignificant number. But here's the critical detail that's been reported. None of those officers were from Victoria Police's Special Operations Group. That's their tactical unit, the heavily armed specialists trained for high-risk operations. 10 regular police officers were sent to serve a warrant on a property owned by someone police knew was a sovereign citizen. Someone who, by definition, rejects government authority and views police as illegitimate. The result? 2 officers were killed. Detective Leading Senior Constable Neil Thompson and Senior Constable Vadim Dewart. A third officer was seriously wounded in the lower body and had to be airlifted to the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne. We still don't know that third officer's name. Victoria Police hasn't released it publicly. And Freeman escaped into the surrounding bushland before the remaining officers could respond. Now, I'm not here to debate what happened in those moments. That's for the courts to determine if Freeman is ever caught. What I am questioning is the planning that led to that situation. Why weren't tactical specialists involved from the beginning? This wasn't a routine traffic stop. This was executing a warrant on someone with a known anti-government ideology. And the consequences of that decision are now playing out across 40 square kilometres of Victorian bushland, with 200 officers still searching more than a month later. So let's connect the dots between the original operation and Commissioner Bush's update. When a police commissioner admits they're researching areas they've already covered, that tells you something. Either the initial searches weren't thorough enough, or they genuinely have no idea where else to look. When 1,400 public tips produce 0 positive leads, that's extraordinary. In most manhunts, at least some tips narrow down the search area or provide useful information. But according to Commissioner Bush himself, None of these 1,400 tips have helped. That suggests a few possibilities. Either Freeman had extensive preparations and support in place, or he was never in the area where the search has been focused. Remember, this is someone described as a doomsday prepper. That means someone who actively prepares for worst-case scenarios. Someone who likely had plans for exactly this type of situation. And police would have known that about him before August 26th. Commissioner Bush keeps mentioning how challenging the terrain is. And yes, the Victorian Alps are rugged. Dense bush, steep valleys, remote areas. But they knew that from day one. The question is, if you know the terrain is challenging, if you know your target is an experienced outdoorsman who's prepared for scenarios like this, why wasn't the initial operation planned accordingly? And why, after deploying 500 officers in the first days, did they fail to find any trace of Freeman when the trail was still fresh? Those first 72 hours are critical. That's when fugitives are most likely to make mistakes, to leave traces, to be spotted. But Freeman vanished completely. This situation has echoes of another Australian manhunt, Malcolm Naden in New South Wales. Naden was also a skilled bushman who knew the terrain intimately. He evaded NSW police for 7 years, in the rugged bushland of the state's north. He was finally caught in 2012, but only after NSW police admitted their initial strategy wasn't working and completely changed their approach. They brought in specialist trackers. They adapted their tactics. The key difference is that NSW police eventually recognized they needed to change course. Based on Commissioner Bush's statements, Victoria Police are continuing the same approach. Searching and researching the same areas, following tips that lead nowhere, maintaining 200 officers in a search zone that's produced no results. Now, I'm not questioning the determination of those officers. Commissioner Bush said they won't give up, and I believe that's true. But determination without adaptation isn't a strategy. At some point, you have to ask whether continuing to do the same thing while expecting different results is actually helping. Commissioner Bush said this case has really damaged Victoria Police. And he's right. But the damage isn't just from the tragedy of August 26th. The damage is accumulating with each week that passes without results. With each admission that they're researching areas. With each acknowledgement that 1,400 public tips have led nowhere. So here are the questions that Commissioner Bush's update raises. Question 1. If you've searched 40 square kilometres and found nothing, at what point do you accept that Freeman probably isn't in that area anymore? Question 2. How did 500 police officers, supported by the Australian Defence Force and equipped with thermal imaging, fail to find any trace in those critical first 72 hours? Question 3. Commissioner Bush mentioned following leads in other locations, but gave no details. Does that mean Victoria Police believes Freeman has left the state? And if so, why are 200 officers still searching the same area? Question 4. After 1,400 tips that led nowhere, has Victoria Police considered that Freeman might have had assistance? Or that the initial search perimeter was simply wrong? Question 5. And this goes back to August 26th. Why wasn't the Special Operations Group involved in the original warrant execution? What was the risk assessment that determined regular officers could handle that situation? These aren't rhetorical questions. These are the questions Victorian taxpayers should be asking when their police force is committing this level of resources. 200 officers, helicopters, millions of dollars, to a search that's produced no results. Let me summarise where this investigation stands, based on Commissioner Bush's own words. Dezi Freeman has been free for over a month. 200 police officers are still actively searching. 40 square kilometres have been physically covered. 1,400 tips from the public have been investigated. $1 million in reward money is on offer, and none of it has produced a single positive lead. Police are now researching areas they've already covered. The Commissioner speaks vaguely about a number of likelihoods without providing specifics about the investigation's direction. Commissioner Bush says Victoria Police is determined and won't give up, but unless there's a fundamental re-examination of the strategy, this could continue for months or even years. Malcolm Naden evaded police for 7 years because they kept using tactics that weren't working. It wasn't until they admitted the approach needed to change that they finally caught him. 2 officers are dead. A third was seriously wounded. A massive manhunt has produced no results despite extraordinary resources. And the questions about how the original operation was planned on August 26th remain unanswered. What do you think? Is Dezi Freeman still somewhere in the Victorian Alps? Or did he slip away in those first critical hours while police were establishing their search perimeter? And more importantly, could this entire situation have been avoided with better operational planning from the start? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for updates on this case, because based on these numbers from Commissioner Bush himself, this story is far from over.